I have always admired you because you were like the ideal Davos participant, a fan who was fully committed everywhere. And you probably worked and slogged away about 20 hours a day. Today, you are here in Davos as the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, and I'm sure that I speak on behalf of the participants, including those from Germany. In the very short time that you have been Chancellor, it's only been about 2.5 months since you were elected as Chancellor, you have been able to create a lot of trust and confidence in you, in your abilities, in your skills to cope with and resolve the problems of the Federal Republic of Germany in a very smooth and soft way, but very determined. Great jobs. You've been able to gain trust in Europe, especially in regard to the creation of a new aspect of Europe, but you have also been able to show your mettle as a global player in global politics. In your current functions as a Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, you will be able to do a lot. Also next year, when you will be the President of the European Union, or rather the President of the Council of Ministers and Heads of State, when you have the presidency of the European Union and at the head of the G8. And we are looking forward very much to your message to us today. You have the floor, Madam Chancellor.
Sehr geehrter
Mr. President of the Confederation, Mr. Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you very warmly for this invitation that has been given me to address the plenary of the forum. It's a great honor for Germany, and I am delighted to be here. The title, The Creative Imperative, will probably remind us all of Immanuel Kant and his imperative, Immanuel Kant, who appealed to the way in which human liberty is to be dealt with. But it may sound a bit complicated. I understand it as follows. In our times, it is absolutely necessary to be creative. It's essential to be creative. And it really should be the driving force behind sensible, creative politics. At least I can say that for what I'm responsible for. But I think it's more and more necessary for all those who are competing with ideas, for all those who want to shape their own future. And I think that applies to everyone. Now, in Germany, since we are preparing the World Football Cup, we are talking a lot about Germany as the country of ideas. Many have said that given the problems that we have, number one problem being unemployment, it's nice and good to talk about ideas and trying to be creative, but we cannot live only from ideas. We have to prove also that we can implement, put into practice these ideas. Every single person, according to his abilities, in Germany, in Europe, and in the world. I would very much like to see Germany becoming one of the first 3 European countries within the next 10 years in terms of growth, employment, and innovation. That is what I wish for Germany. And I believe very firmly in our ability to do so. But I think it's also going to be of essential importance for Europe that Germany achieves this. It's very nice to hear implement ideas, but if you look at things very coldly and analytically, we are as if paralyzed by events and situations and don't seem to be able to overcome this. This doesn't work, that doesn't work. But when I speak about Germany, I believe we need more freedom of movement, more leeway, more freedom of action. And if we want to achieve this, to become amongst the leaders in the next 10 years in employment and creativity, then I would like to use this slogan, this age-old tradition, growth and employment and work. But for all that, we need freedom. We have to remove obstacles. We have to open the windows. We have to breathe deeply, fresh air, and we have to see the opportunities rather than the risks and the hazards. It is a responsible liberty. It's not exemption from responsibility, but the liberty to take action. When I prepared this speech, I was not only thinking of Immanuel Kant, but someone else came to my mind, a predecessor of mine, the father of the social market economy. He, in 1948, said that the connection between freedom and responsibility requires order. And in 1957, when he wrote Prosperity for All, he wrote, and I quote, "I want to prove myself with my own strength. I want to bear the risk of life myself. I want to be responsible for my own destiny. And you, the state, see to it that I am able to do this," unquote. Own strength, your own strength, on the one hand, and the state as the force that gives order. These are the two poles of the market economy. And what Erhard said in 1947 and 1958 and what he did in those years are still valid. And it's really a pioneering kind of attitude. For me, it is the most dignified and humane market and social economy. We have to believe in the mature citizen, and that is really the idea behind social balance and equal opportunity. This spiritual and intellectual idea of responsible freedom. We have learned this from dire situations, mass unemployment, war. And in Germany, it did not just stay an idea, it was implemented in Germany, and it was reflected in what was called the economic miracle. What about today? We have to cope with many problems. There's a very high and terrifyingly high level of unemployment in Europe. All those who feel competition and have to fear for their prosperity are afraid about this globalization. Those who cannot participate in the economic wealth, they have fears. And it is true that the world has changed very rapidly. At the end of the Cold War, in Germany, this was connected with the fall of the wall in Berlin on the 9th of November, maybe triggered off also, at least promoted with the development of the Internet. Information now can be found everywhere. The industrialized countries now account for 20% of the world population, but consume 70% of total energy consumption. We know that more than 1 billion have to survive on less than $1 a day. There is a tremendous economic growth in China of more than 10%. All this indicates there is a lot of change forthcoming. In about 200 years ago, Europe turned into an industrial society from an agricultural society, and that was a tremendous change. We are now in a time where the industrial industry has become a knowledge industry and has developed quite far along this road, and this poses qualitative challenges. We have to rethink these challenges and see We have to see all of this against this backdrop. What kind of framework, what order do we need? This modern society, what framework do we need so that all can profit and benefit from the fruits of the economy and industry? This is a question that is the same for all industrialized countries, emerging countries, developing countries. And if we cannot find a conclusive answer to this question, very serious social disorder and troubles may develop, the consequences of which we have to be responsible for. And I think one of the appropriate answers is the creative imperative. We have to make sure that the political world intervenes at the right points and also gives up or withdraws when it is appropriate. Just as at the beginning of the market economy, the social market economy, we have to make use of our own strengths and strong points and the driving force of the political world and bring a balance to these two elements. From my point of view, certain points have to be set. There's a need for further development of the social market economy. I would call it a new social market economy, rising to a new level into two directions. First of all, we have to bear in mind the international dimension, but we also have to see what it means in terms of global networking. For this new social market economy, in Germany at least, all sorts of questions are raised. Does it mean that we are giving up the principles of the market economy or the social market economy? I don't think so. We simply have to realize and accept that there are new challenges that have to be met to shape globalization. Fears, the righteous fears, come from the fact that the people have lost their trust in the politicians to shape globalization properly. And I still believe that politicians have a role to play in the shaping of globalization.
So something has to be done. That's absolutely clear. It means we must change our national policies. It means that we, as the biggest economy of Europe, must assume our responsibilities in Europe. We have to do that in our own particular way, but that is a permanent task that we face. We must take up our international responsibilities, and as you've said, Professor Schwab, also holding the chairmanship of the G8, we also have a contribution to make in that role. So in the 21st century, to shape a new market, a social market economy, first of all, we need new priorities for political action. The political understanding has to come first, and that must concern itself with the future generation. And in Germany, that means that we have to reform our financial situation. We have to reform our budgetary situation. We know we have too few young people, but at the same time we are living at we're permanently indebting ourselves, indebting future generations, and that is narrowing the room for investment and development, and that is morally indefensible. Secondly, we have to invest in the future, and for me that means that research and development must be the focus of our investment, because innovation is the key. The creative imperative is reflected in the question, how innovative are we? And that is particularly applicable to countries which have high living standards and, of course, high earnings. And that is only possible to maintain that if we give absolute priority to innovation. The fact that we in Germany have now decided to adopt the target by 2010 of 3% of GDP for development purposes, that is a political task, but it is also a task for business, for the economy, and that once again means for politicians and politics that must create the framework within which these things are possible. Pharmaceuticals, for example, gene technology, because it is that the creation of the framework within which this can happen, which will make it possible. It is also a competition among the best intellects, the best minds, which is something we have to organize. In a society like Germany, we have to also improve the balance between professional life and family life, and in particular, smaller units and more flexible structures have to be given priority. And in Germany, that means we have to reshape the federal structure in order to improve and expedite decision making. And there's one point which I think is particularly important, and that is the reducing the labor costs, the additional labor costs, and labor and unemployment is the key here, because that is the way people gauge their own prosperity, their own welfare. We have to ask ourselves, and I can do so by giving you one example, what are people going to spend in future? What are they going to spend their money on? And if we look at the field of health, that is of extraordinary importance, which has to develop in the sense of freedom, and that is going to be a very important point for us when we reform the health system. The tax system has to be made viable for the future. And I want to say this to everyone who is thinking perhaps of investing in Germany. We have to create stability so that entrepreneurs can rely on the long-term applicability of what has been decided. And that is something I would like to say to all potential investors. Ladies and gentlemen, we also, of course, need a world in which we can reflect on competitiveness in the international order. I have a clear commitment to international institutions, and I want to make that clear to you. The conclusion of bilateral agreements between individual players in the world is not going to take us any further forward. We have to learn to live in a global world and to make agreements among ourselves in a global world. So this isn't a socialistic approach with some kind of central planning or central ordering of things. There needs to be a new interaction, a new interpenetration of the various players. I think a key function of the WTO is to ensure the freedom of trade, because free trade is one of the major prerequisites for ensuring that the players can all participate. There are many fears in Germany, too, that free trade may lead to disadvantages. But increase in freedom has always led to better development in Germany, and these fears can be overcome. We saw what happened in Hong Kong. We must continue our efforts so that that doesn't happen again, and we shall do what we can to ensure that the WTO does become a major guarantor of international agreements. Of course, we have to ensure access for the developing countries, and I would like to say at this point that Germany has committed itself to, by 2015, devoting 0.7% of GDP for development. We will really want to see that happen. We need a strategic dialogue with threshold countries. The world is undergoing major changes, transformation, and Europe must further develop. We need a cooperation between environmental protection and with all the International Monetary Fund, with the World Trade Organization, with the World Bank. All of these things must be coordinated within the framework of the market economy. This is our own experience, at any rate. The proper balance between social and environmental considerations is essential. And all of this must be, we have to find room for this as we shape the future. When we talk about creative imperative, it is of the utmost importance that we should succeed in bringing about intellectual innovation and also protection against piracy. And I'm firmly convinced, and when we get to the presidency of the G8, we are going to commit ourselves to this.
gemeinsame technische Standards.
We need shared or common technical standards. This is an extraordinarily interesting field because this is a question of market access. We've had extraordinarily positive experience in Germany where we've seen the development of phone technology, and this has given rise to a situation where we were able to be market leaders. But then the question arises, this hasn't actually developed to the point that it might. Ladies and gentlemen, we also need, of course, to reach understanding and agreement about common values. And this is also a particular relevance when it comes to the Constitutional Treaty. I think the Constitutional Treaty is of great importance for the European Union because it looks beyond the individual regulation and has made a contribution to our reaching clear understanding and a clear agreement about our shared values. And that applies too to the transatlantic community, but beyond that, to the global community. It is not going to be possible without ethic commonalities to achieve economic and political commonalities as well. So these discussions have to be conducted in parallel. Ladies and gentlemen, I think thirdly that we need new instruments and mechanisms. We have grown accustomed, in Germany particularly, to laws that have been in effect for decades, overly rigid regulation. We must become more flexible now. We must look for the best ways of sharing in a benchmarking process, that we draw fully on the experience of others, that we are open to the experience of others. And we have to have the strength to tackle the problems of bureaucracy. And this is something which I've been particularly concerned with. We have we are binding or fettering enormous energies in Germany at this time because we have been, because of fears for security. 6% of the business turnover of an SME are spent on bureaucratic costs. And we have to consider whether we shouldn't be investing this money better in young people rather than continuously devising new regulations. And I think we can't progress further in that direction. Each individual rule or regulation has associated with it a lobby. We must gauge the true costs of bureaucracy, and we must see where we can reduce those costs. We must look to the experience of the Netherlands and the United Kingdom in this regard. And of course, we have to recognize that it's very difficult for politicians to see dismantle something they themselves have created. So we have to help them along with that. And in our presidency, we are going to try to strengthen and carry on this process. These targets can be achieved. They can be achieved best with Germany's participation. By the year 2010, our target is to make Europe the most dynamic continent. But to turn this creative imperative into real innovation, that is a challenge. That is something which we must not give up, because our future prosperity depends on it. But the so-called Lisbon strategy has to become our political priority in Germany. So we're trying to do something for the first time in the European Constitution. That is to test the guidelines, the rules which have been in place for decades. We're not simply adding to something which was already there, but we also look to see what can be done away with. and it's better perhaps to do away with some obsolete guidelines or directives rather than creating new regulations. And we shall never tire of
Denn heutzutage ist es so, eine einmal auf den Markt gekommene Richtlinie besteht bis zum Ende der Geschichte. Es gibt keinen Weg.
We must get away from the idea that a directive is in place for all time and can never be reconsidered.
Sondern damit bringt sich Europa in Unsicherheit.
Because that, in fact, could lead to greater insecurity for Europe. And it is, in the course of our presidency, I think we shall be in a position to harness the potential of Europe and to really do something with it. Ladies and gentlemen, all in all then, we face great tasks, great challenges. We are in a world which is developing, which is undergoing rapid transformation, headlong transformation. And I belong to that part of the world which has been accustomed to be at the forefront of movement. At the end, since the end of the Cold War, we've seen that dreams have come true. We've seen that suddenly we had our freedom, and after that we saw that that freedom entailed a stronger competition process. We had the most wonderful prerequisites, at least for Germany, this was true. Much experience with democracy, much experience with conflict resolution, good social networks, environmental security. And it would be disastrous if we could not muster the energy to take up the challenges that face us now and to seize the opportunities before us. I think we can do this if we all understand that freedom is an elementary good for humankind, but it isn't arbitrariness, it is responsible freedom, and the new dimension of the social market economy will help us to find our place in this new world. There'll be no problem that we can shirk. This is the challenge that we all face. In my government declaration, I said that we seek to make many small steps. We're working in a grand coalition, but I'm firmly convinced that if we go about this decisively, resolutely, in taking these small steps, then we have every possibility of ensuring that Germany plays its role in the world as a motor, as an engine in Europe, as a responsible participant in the G8, as a nation which assumes that everyone has the equal right to improve their living standards, that we understand about the finite nature of resources, and that's important to understand that, as well as setting free our energies and our resources. And of course this also involves our energy policy. We have no definitive strategic responses to these questions. We need to get to grips with an energy policy, how we can save energy. I was once environment minister, and I saw that good technologies can also be a creative imperative. Ladies and gentlemen, 200 years ago, James Watt said, and I quote, "There's nothing, the most important thing in life is to invent." At that time, there was somebody came up with a patent. Of course, he invented the steam engine and transformed the world, this James Watt. We're living in a time where all the imperatives of creativity, they haven't replaced the old virtues of industry, hard work, but those are not enough. We are in the first decade of the knowledge age. But let's do it. Let us take part in the development of the world. The Germans, actually introduced the computer age when Konrad Zuse, who built the first computer. Not everybody knows that. And looking at the developments that have resulted from that, if I look at Google, Microsoft, and others, it looks as if we haven't sufficiently participated in this. This is rather a painful recognition because we have to consider how we can best contribute to these innovative developments. I think that we may have neglected certain things. We haven't actually given practical effect to all our ideas. And that's why I say that Germany must believe in this again. And we believe and we must believe that our country can live better from its ideas. Germany and Europe will make their contribution to ensuring that when people look back, they will say that these years were the years of innovation in Europe. We don't direct this against others because China, India, and many other countries have this capability. But we have to face up to the competition. Because we believe that in the way we do business, the way we run our economies, with the success of the social market economy, we have created a human society which should succeed on a global level. And we have a contribution to make to this discussion. I would like to conclude with Ludwig Erhard once again and say, I want to use my own strength, I want to take on the risks of this life, I want to be responsible for my own fate. You, state, you see to it that I am in a position to do this. That is the task of politics, of politicians, to shape the conditions in which people can have hope, policy that doesn't approach things from a protectionist point of view, but which looks to competition to foster the best ideas within the framework of the creative imperative. Thank you very much for your attention.